Hey, what's up? Exit the Matrix. Bob here. Hope you're having a great day. Hey guys, today I wanted to do a video talking about the 3 pillars of control over humanity. And it's very simple. Break these 3 down, and then I kind of want to go back to the beginning of it all and where all this comes from. But those 3 main pillars, and most of you already probably guessed this, would be number 1, government. Number 2, monetary policy or currency. And, of course, number 3, religion. These are the 3 main pillars used to control and manipulate humankind. And to be fair, to a certain point, these pillars also are needed to have some kind of a, what's the word I'm trying to say here? Some kind of organization to civilization. So they're tools too. They can be used for good or bad. However, I think we find with everything in this realm, everything turns corrupt at some point. Everything that was meant to be something to stabilize civilization, to add security and development, eventually turns into tyranny and control and manipulation. And the reason for that, folks, it's very simple. It doesn't matter if it was in ancient times or in modern times. People that like to be in a power position over other people, people that crave power and control, people that crave attention for personal gain, typically tend to be psychopaths. And at the very least, extreme narcissists. And we see this every day with our own politicians. It doesn't matter, folks, right or left. They're both wings of the same rotten, stinking bird. Well, it's always been that way. And this is interesting because when we think back to at least what we're told, our earliest cultures, that would be like Sumer, Egypt, Indus Valley, and of course the ancient ones in Mesoamerica, which unfortunately I can't really go into that much because we don't know who really were the original inhabitants of the megalithic structures in Peru and such. They claim it's the Incans and all that, you know. Then of course in Latin America that it's the Aztecs and Mayans, but there were a lot older cultures than them. So I can't really go into that too much about them because of the missing history there. However, Sumer is a great case file, so we'll use them as our example for a talk today, because they even say in the cuneiform tablets that the gods brought down, or they lowered down, kingship from heaven to earth. And it says that the gods taught humankind all of the means to build civilization. You know, metallurgy and animal husbandry and, agriculture and astronomy and math and science and engineering and warfare. And, interestingly, beautification. Like makeup and stuff like that. So, these were all things that were taught to humankind. A lot of times when you see the ancient, the Apkallu or the Anunnaki, and of course you find these depictions in Egypt and all over Mesoamerica too, but there always shows the gods, or at least who are representing the gods, carrying a handbag in one hand, and a lot of times they'll have a pine cone or another tool in their other hand. Well, those handbags are called mis in the cuneiform tablets. And a lot of people have been going on and on for a while trying to figure out, like, what are the Me's? What do the Me's stand for? What do they represent? Well, I mean, I think it's kind of simple to understand when you think about what was brought down, lowered from heaven to earth as far as the tools for civilization. That's what the Me's are. They were those tools that they brought, like a toolbox, think of it that way. They brought those tools to civilization, and they taught mankind how to do all that. That was to rebuild civilization after mass catastrophe. And there were just pockets of survivors around the world living in caves that were living primal again, that were, one with the land. They were hunters and gatherers and only used rudimentary, cruel tools and weapons and stuff. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, and of course we understand mainstream academia, archaeology, they're full of shit. We get that by now. I don't think all of them are. I just think most of them, they know that there's more to the story, but they're afraid to pop their head up above the crowd because they're afraid it'll get whacked back down, because it's a very cutthroat thing as far as white papers go and research grants and archaeological grants and all that, and these colleges are nothing but manipulation tools. If you went to college, great, fantastic. But you'll probably think back and think and know what I'm saying here, that a lot of what they put you through in college is just further manipulation and brainwashing. Yeah, you gain some decent knowledge about certain subjects, but a lot of it was also trying to program you to be a certain kind of person, a worker or whatever, a certain kind of cog for the machine of civilization. So these archaeologists, they just are like, oh yeah, all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, like hunter-gatherers built magnificent, highly evolved and technologically advanced civilization called Sumer, early Mesopotamia culture. I mean, we went from hunters-gatherers to building aqueducts and the Hanging Gardens, to building ziggurat pyramids, to building megalithic blocks and structures, to understanding astronomy, understanding there's cuneiform cylinder seals of the planets, of the solar system, of planets that you can't see with the naked eye. So something happened. It's quite obvious. But this lowering of these means to build civilization from heaven to earth is very interesting, folks. And you find the same story in the Book of Enoch. There's a reason why the Book of Enoch was taken out of the Bible. Yes, it was in the original older forms of the Bible, like the Ethiopian Bible. It's because it explains this whole story. It explains a technologically advanced group of beings, and I'm not even going to argue the point right now, folks, if they're interdimensional, extraterrestrial, or possibly like Atlantean or some advanced civilization that once lived on Earth. But regardless, it talks about the same thing, that these watchers, these Anuna gods, they came down and they taught civilization building to humanity. They taught all of the different things you needed to build a complex civilization. Hell, the first beer recipe was on a cuneiform tablet. The gods even taught mankind how to brew beer, how to make wine, how to read the changes of the seasons, how to come up with a calendar system, how to count the days in a year. I mean, all these were advanced. You have to understand, folks, from a hunter-gatherer that was using flint tool like knives and hammers made out of rocks and vines and and sticks and stuff to building metal weapons and metal tools and building giant canals and aqueducts in arid regions, in manipulating rivers, the Euphrates and Tigris. Sorry, I always say that wrong. And there was three things also that the gods, and yes, that's Elohim, the gods, Elohim, the shining ones, the gods. El is singular, Elohim is plural. This was not the creator of all, folks. You've been duped. We all have been. But they also didn't just come here to teach humanity all these things. They understood that they needed to bring order and control over these wild hunter-gatherers that they were teaching these systems to. They understood that you couldn't just teach them this stuff. You had to have a structure. You had to have a foundation to build on. So they also introduced government and religion and currency. Of course, government at those early days were essentially the humans that were a little smarter than the rest, that these gods, these watchers could trust to carry out their bidding, to manage these city-states that they were building. So they appointed men in power positions who were their puppets. And understand this too, folks. Whatever this means to you, it doesn't matter. A lot of these original rulers were demigods. They were half Anunnaki and half human. And you'll see this in the ancient stories, like Gilgamesh was 2/3 Anunnaki and 1/3 human. You look at Hercules and all these the men of renown. Look at in the Bible, King of Og of Bashan. He was a ruler. A lot of these early rulers, you find this in the Egyptian too, folks. Like, look at King Akhenaten with the elongated skull and such. There were these hybrid characters that were the crossover from the who were called the Watchers, the Shining Ones, and who interbred with the new Homo sapiens. And that rulership was handed down to them to rule over the lesser man. And then eventually, as those bloodlines got thinned out a little more, they became more human-like, more fully human-like. And then at that, later on, as thousands of years passed, then you had just basically what we would term as humans, Homo sapiens, ruling over these city-states and such. But you see this interesting pattern in all the ancient cultures, that it started out with these godlike beings that were the ones ruling, and then their demigod children, and then eventually it was just humans, and these beings went away. But did they really? Or perhaps are they just managing this realm from behind the scenes, from a distance? And then, of course, you had religion introduced. And you see this in even ancient Mesopotamia, these Anuna gods. A lot of these city-states would be dedicated to a certain deity. Like the city-state that Gilgamesh ruled over. It was Uruk. It was a city-state of Inanna, who you would know in the Bible as Ishtar, who a lot of you Christians like to worship her religion of fertility, her festival of fertility called Easter, which has been practiced for thousands and thousands of years. We could probably go back, good 8,000 years or more. these city-states were dedicated to these gods, but it wasn't just that. They say in the cuneiform that these gods lived amongst them. They lived in the ziggurats, in the temples, and that their priest class were the ones that interacted with man on their behalf. You even find this in the Bible. Think of the tent that the Hebrews carried, and they would set up the altar and all that, and the Levites would go behind the veil to talk to God, and then they would come back from behind the veil and they would tell the people what God told them. It's the same thing, folks, over and over. They figured out that not only did they want to help build civilization and teach humans how to build civilization, but they wanted to rule through religion and government from behind the scenes. They got humans to worship them. They loved the fact that they were seen as gods by these lesser, smaller, weaker beings, and they loved that they were worshipped as gods, even though they were not actual gods in the sense that I guess you would call a god, or like a, when I say God, like big G God, I'm talking about the source of all creation. These deities were humanoids. They had to put their pants on just like you do. They had to consume food. They had to eat and drink. And you'll find this in the Old Testament, that yes, Yahweh actually ate food and such. He walked around amongst man, like in the Garden of Eden. So, and then the final control mechanism was currency. Currency was such a big thing in ancient Sumer that almost half of these tablets that they find are receipts for sales, for taxes, and IOUs, you know, like what you would call like checks, or debts that we see in our modern society as far as banking goes. Yes, that old banking system, it was designed from the beginning to enslave humanity. And to be fair, there's got to be an exchange of goods, because like say you raise pigs. Well, you don't always just want to eat pig. You may want to have some chicken. You may need some grains to make bread to go with that. You may need some milk from cows. So they bartered with each other. They traded and bartered. Here's one of my pigs for 4 of your chickens. Here's, and so on. And so currency was introduced to civilization as a way to manage this bartering system. And of course, debt was introduced as a way to allow somebody to purchase a larger amount than they could pay up front with, but then over time they could pay that debt off. And to be fair, these three systems, folks, to this early mankind that was coming out of the Stone Age, that had been sent back into the Stone Age, to reorganize humankind, you kind of needed these structures. Religion was a way to introduce morality to mankind, so that you just don't go over to your neighbor's house and take their daughter and kill the husband and steal their animals. There had to be repercussions for that. And of course, law was another thing introduced, but religion was a way to passively get people to follow these laws. And of course, you've read of Hammurabi's Law, or the Ten Commandments, which essentially the Ten Commandments was a copy off of Hammurabi's code. You needed these things. Now here's where things turn sour. First off, if you have just rulers, and you actually have spiritual teachers that are trying to enlighten people, not enslave them to a deity, that can be a positive with religion. Now, with government. You do need some kind of organization to manage a society, a civilization. You can't just have pure anarchy. You have to have structures. Because human beings are selfish at heart. We strive against each other. Not always. Some would say, no, humans are very loving and giving and sharing. Yes, in certain circumstances they can be. But a lot of that is based on their moral viewpoints and such. But for the most part, times were hard back then too. So people, I mean, your lifespan, most people didn't live past 50 years old. I mean, you had a short life, and it was a hard life. And, they didn't have the modern medicines and technologies we have that nowadays, which I guess we could argue that maybe we're going in the other direction now, but that's for another day. But back then, it was way shorter lifespans. And so you needed some of these things, religion and government and currency, banking. Now, what happens though is, like I mentioned earlier, psychopaths want to rule over people. It's like a natural instinct to them. And we see it every day. You can look at any of our politicians here in America. It's quite obvious. You know what I'm talking about. I don't care. If you buy into that left-right paradigm, you're not an awake person at all. You're completely asleep in the matrix. But these systems get corrupted, folks. Religion gets corrupted. See, back then the priest class figured out, hey, we can collect gold from these people. We can collect their food, the fruits of their labors, and we can even trick them to bring the best cuts of their meat, their best livestock, and best fruits of their labors to us, so that they can find salvation in the afterlife, or that the gods would smile upon their next harvest. So they would bring, they're getting the priest class, they're getting the ribeyes and the tenderloins, and, they're getting the real choice cuts, they're getting the good stuff, They're sitting there, and then they say, oh yeah, bless you in the name of Enlil. Oh, in the name of Enki or Inanna, yes. Oh yes, thanks for your offerings of your best lamb. We'll talk to Inanna on your behalf and make sure that you stay fertile and that you can have another child. Oh yes. We'll speak to Enki on your behalf, and you'll catch more fish than you normally do, and your bounty will be greater, and all this. And all of a sudden, these systems started figuring out how to manipulate mankind. And of course, humans are easy to manipulate, which is quite obvious. And of course, government, you got psychopaths. They love to rule over other people, so they like to rise to the top of power. Your moral, just person is not usually a ruler. They don't have that drive to rule over other people. And then a currency, I mean, what better way to control people but through debt, right? I mean, now we're to a point now where the minute you come through your mother's womb into the world, you're already given a Social Security number, and you're made a collateral on your nation's debt. So you're already in debt the day you're born, folks. So a lot of this stuff, folks, is just surface talk, and I will admit there is some good aspects to these three pillars, but there's also, with corruption and the fall of civilization, or the descent, you could call it, or the crumbling of civilization, we'll find that these three pillars become very tyrannical. And we're watching that right now. I mean, at an unprecedented amount. We're watching how fast, just blatant corruption now. They used to hide it. Now it's just in the open. And the courts are corrupt. The laws are corrupt. There is no justice anymore. And this is usually when civilizations get reset. I'm just saying, folks, it's the truth. If you look at ancient times, look at the fall of Rome. So, anyways, guys, I'm at work. I got to go. I appreciate you guys a lot, and I will talk to you later.